Activists and journalists have raised the question of whether Americans should look to the Arab Spring as an indicator of where the Occupy movement is going. This analogy is particularly relevant with regard to the 2012 presidential election in the United States. Saad Atshan is a Palestinian lecturer in peace and conflict studies at Tufts University. He shares his thoughts on how the two movements are connected.
Recession is hitting America very hard, and unemployment rates are really skyrocketing, and this is creating a sense of, deep concern among the youth, and I think that allows them to really connect with their counterparts who are in the Middle East, where we face a huge problem with particularly these two issues which are also related, of youth, hopelessness, and also of there being very high unemployment rates.
An alumnus of Swarthmore College, a small liberal arts school near Philadelphia and War News Radio's parent institution, Atshan talks about how young people in the Middle East did not grow up in the economic boom of the 1990s that today's American youth experienced. This has caused Arab youth to become cognizant of inequitable economic systems more rapidly than American youth. One of the nice things about the movement in Egypt, says Atshan, is that it was socioeconomically diverse, with both very wealthy and very poor Egyptians taking to the streets.
It brought together people from so many different walks of life, both Christians and Muslims. There's very powerful joint, interfaith protests.
Douglas Knoll, a full-time mediator and law professor specializing in intractable conflict at San Joaquin College of Law in California, agrees that both the Occupy movement and the Arab Spring are rooted in similar perceptions of economic and political injustice.
It's been labeled as Occupy Wall Street, but really it's turned out to be a global protest. It started in Israel and sort of was patterned after protests in the Arab world, but now has gotten traction everywhere. And what we see is a protest against a perception of gross distributive injustice.
Knoll describes distributive injustice as an imbalance in how resources around the world are concentrated, leading to wealth consolidating in the hands of a very few while the middle class has essentially been economically eviscerated. However, Knoll sees some fundamental differences in the experiences motivating the two movements.
In every single country where there has been unrest, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, now Syria, Yemen, Bahrain, people are resisting not only an economic injustice, but also autocratic regimes where people do not have a representative government, and where the autocrats, instead of being benign, gentle dictators, have been brutal.
For this reason, Knoll says that it's not productive to compare the Occupy movement to,
a protest in Tunisia or in Egypt, where you are protesting against an autocracy that, is fundamentally oppressing your civil rights, even your basic right to assemble and speak out against the government.
In a discussion with American journalism students, Nada Al-Wadi, a Bahraini journalist and writer currently living in Washington, D.C., disagreed with Knoll's analysis. Al-Wadi, who fled Bahrain after witnessing the government crackdown last spring, says that the Occupy movement was hugely inspired by the Arab Spring and is rooted in all of the same problems. Al-Wadi described the in-depth coverage that Occupy Wall Street has received in the Middle East and the sense of pride and validation that Occupy has given Arab Spring activists. Haider Hamzaz, an Iraqi social media activist working in Baghdad, thinks that the important connection between the movements is the shared learning experience that they have catalyzed for activists around the world.
I think maybe not just the United States, all the world, they learn from Arab Spring that if they need the freedom, they can do it, like what happened in Tunis, Egypt, and other countries. If they need to do that, they can do it, but still using the peaceful demonstrations, peaceful tools.
Hamza says that the most important thing that the movements have in common is the prominence of new media platforms, which have enabled a new democratic form. Atshan agrees that the role of the media has been tremendous, especially that of Arab news organizations within the Middle East.
What was really great about Al Jazeera's coverage, it was live during the Egyptian revolution. From your living room, you felt as if you were in Tahrir Square. So it was really, I think, exciting to be in the region at that time when it was being followed very closely by most people and vigorously debated and discussed.
Atchan says that the Arab media was very much on top of its coverage of the protests and delivered thoughtful, comprehensive reporting.
Now, I'm not sure that we can say the same about the Occupy movement in the U.S. I think that the media coverage is getting better, but I'm not sure that they're getting the coverage that they need to be getting.
He talks about how this disparity has only fueled impetus for the protests in the United States, as the strong link between the mainstream media in the U.S. and the rest of the corporate world is one of the things being protested. Still, there are distinguishing elements missing from the protests in the U.S.
I'm not sure yet that we see the law enforcement officials being sympathetic to the protesters and to the demands and needs of the protesters and accommodating them in the way that they should be accommodated. So I think that's also that will be a critical factor. If we see more media coverage and we see more cracks within the establishment.
Al-Wadi says that Occupy has been largely ignored by the American media because it is a movement that is, quote, working against the system, and the mainstream media is embedded in this system. The main issue right now, says Al-Wadi, is figuring out how to create your own media. Noel sees different factors at play in determining the staying power of the movement.
So I think the Occupy Wall Street movement has the potential, if it can be energized and harnessed by a leader who can resonate with what these people are saying, can be a very powerful force of change. Until that leadership arises and emerges, it's just going to be this kind of inchoate mass of unhappiness.
Noel connects this to his studies as a peacemaker and international mediator, believing the movement to be a potential determinant of the outcome of the 2012 U.S. presidential election.
Eventually, a leader will step up, and hopefully not a charlatan, and hopefully not an ideologue, but that's always possible. And if that person is able to capture the emotion of what these protesters are feeling, that person's going to have a very powerful movement behind him or her.
He says that the people who are energized to protest, a group whose numbers are steadily growing, will subsequently be energized to vote.
It will not become an issue unless it is still going strong at the time of the general election contest at the end of next summer and into next fall.
According to Noel, if the Occupy movement is still going strong by next fall and the Republicans still have not given it credence, they will jeopardize their competitiveness in the election. Al-Wadi says this movement will lead to something big, whether it's in politics or in the streets. For War News Radio, I'm Sara Blazevic.